Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this special CNBC Africa broadcast coming to you from the Sheraton Hotel in Kampala, Uganda. I'm Alisha Seckam, and I'll be moderating this session over the next hour, exploring the economic growth outlook for Uganda by throwing the spotlight on the business and investment climate specifically. Certainly, many African emerging markets have proven over the last several years that they are an attractive investment destination, and this despite the challenges that have been presented by the global economic crisis. But they can do more to prove their competitiveness on the global stage. So tonight, we'll be taking a closer look at the role regional integration has to play in this regard, with Uganda, of course, part of the East African community. And to help me take the pulse of this African market this evening, joining me are the Honourable Amelia Chambade, Minister of Trade, Industry and Cooperatives, Annette Semwemba, who's Country Director at Trademark East Africa, Herman Kasakende, who's the MD of Standard Chartered Bank Uganda, and Mazen Mrue, who's the CEO of MTN Uganda as well. Let's get straight into discussion, and right at the top, Minister, let's start off with you. Sell us the investment case that Uganda is putting on the table right now.
I believe that Uganda offers the best investment climate because it is one of the countries with the fastest growing economies, between 5 and 6%. It has a liberalized economy, which is rare in other countries. But then at the same time, it's at the center of East African community. So it's the center of distribution, and it's the logistical center because it has become a transit point. Whoever wants to go to DRC or wants to transport goods to Rwanda, wants to transport goods to other places, this is the center. So I feel that it is the best investment destination because it has other areas that are very attractive. For example, like tourism, mining, and oil is another nascent industry that we feel that in about five years will be self-reliant.
It's a case that certainly boasts more merit as we see the East African Common Market Protocol having been signed and the region standing as a stronger investment drawcard. Well, that's the theory. How's it translating into reality?
It's a challenge because a lot is decided in the protocol, but on the ground, the understanding of those protocols, the legislation that needs to be harmonized or reviewed for those decisions that have been made through the protocol to actually be implemented. So some of the work that we support as Trademark is to bring this information, present it in simpler terms so that businesses can understand what is it in the protocols for them. How can they move across the borders? So the benefit is in the document, but the understanding of that document is the problem, and that is the reason that is part of the challenge that we're trying to address.
Well, we'll be extrapolating on regional integration a little later on. For now, with the focus on Uganda itself, Herman, it's a strategic location near the center of sub-Saharan Africa, presents the country with the ability to become a hub in East Africa, but in Central Africa and that region as well. From your perspective as business, just how far off the mark are we in that regard specifically? Because we had the minister highlight that she sees the country as being land-linked as opposed to landlocked, but there are various challenges that we face.
Thank you. And I'd like to welcome CNBC Africa to Uganda. I think I would like to agree with the minister in terms of the position where Uganda finds itself. Uganda has been growing for the best part of the last 10 years, the last decade. The economy has been growing at about 7%. When you look at the other macros, inflation, we had some issues the past about 1.5 years, but now it's been tamed in the region of about 4%. And the target is 5%. And from the information we've got, or we've gathered, it's actually, it will remain range-bound 5 to 7%. Quite apart from that, the exchange rate has actually lately appreciated. But I think it suffices to say that the exchange rate has been stable over the period. The other thing is that the interest rates are being fairly, and I say fairly attractive to offshore players. And that has been part of the reason why we've seen inflows, which have actually helped to kind of prop up the local currency unit. So a lot has happened, and I think that leaves Uganda as one of the key investment destinations, given the macros, the strong macros that we have, but also the liberalized economy, the way it is. It puts us actually in a better position than some of the nations or markets in West Africa. Being landlocked, I don't think it is a disadvantage, where we, and I again agree with the minister, that we've become actually a hub. If you want to go to Eastern DRC, you come to Uganda, or if the residents of DRC want to import, they'll come and shop here. Those who want to go to Southern Sudan, this presents the best route.
Well, in fact, to get the ball rolling even faster, Minister, we've had Vision 2040 having been laid out, and that offering a blueprint as to the targets that need to be hit here. Now, some question whether it's a vision that stays on paper. Have viable targets been set here? Because it requires the economy to grow at 8.2% per annum for the next 30 years. And we've seen, as you've all highlighted, an average growth rate of between 5 and 7%.
Yes. That is one of the biggest achievements we've had, that vision. And we've already started implementing some parts of it. Number one, infrastructure development. An emphasis has been on the roads. And most of the roads that lead out to the region have been worked upon. We're planning to work on the railway, and there are plans underway to work on the railway, because that is also another major area. ICT, the cable, we've already implemented that, and it's still in progress, but at least the service, it's rendering at least about 60% of the internet service in the country, or more than that. So what I'd like to say that when we came up with this vision, we had already started working on some of the issues that are paramount. We're looking at the youth. Youth is another resource that we have overlooked in most African countries. In Africa, Africa has about 64% of the youth, which I feel it is a resource because it is highly productive. But in Uganda, we have 54%. And how have we worked on them? According to that vision, we are offering skills. And we're going for vocational institutions. Mm-hmm. So that is also another, we're building skills amongst the youth, because we see the youth as one of our biggest resources in Africa.
So inroads being made in that regard. You can understand the cynicism though, Mazen. So let's take this to you, because we've had Vision 2025 blurring into obscurity. Before that, all ambitious government plans tended to end with the phrase before the year 2000. So what's different now? And as business, where do your confidence levels sit on government actually delivering this time around?
We believe that in addition to being acknowledged and appreciated as the industry, as the largest taxpayer, having the largest distribution network and the most visible brand and all other assets, we are true partners for the governments, and that's really has been reflected in different areas. One of the areas is the infrastructure that we are putting on the ground. The access to the international submarine cables, making Uganda accessible through multiple routes, which making the country much more exposed to the international technology. Secondly, the infrastructure that we put on the ground in terms of laying or accessing or making mobile money as an area which really can make especially the float of the monies, the funds, the trade, much more accessible and much more flexible in the country. So there is a certain elements. We see that there is an ongoing process, and we are glad to see that, especially during the last few years, a serious approach from the government in engaging the private sector, including the ICT, including MTN. We are not only looked at us as just taxpayer or technology provider. They look at us as a government where we can partner, where we can extend our services more. And looking at Uganda, selling Uganda as one of the most attractive locations for investors, which is very important for us to highlight at this level. I think we need to mention that Uganda was one of the first countries where MTN decided to invest after South Africa. Being in Uganda 15 years already is one of the places like, if we make benchmark across all the 22 countries where MTN exists, MTN is lowest in terms of having expatriates working in the operations, among other operations, where we have more than 10 Ugandan now holding senior positions in other operations outside of Uganda. So this is an important point where the skills available in Uganda. Yeah. That is very important to attract investors. Second, another area which also we feel that it's going to help the investors, the investment that we made recently in terms of MTN business, making an area where the investors, they don't need to invest in their own data infrastructure, where they can come and host their solutions. So there is certain elements we feel that we are true partners.
Yeah. Annette, from the businesses that you deal with in the region, when it comes to political stability specifically, I mean, we've had President Museveni at the helm for the past 27 years, and that begs the question around the stability of economic policy moving forward. I mean, are we looking at sustainability and economic policy continuing beyond this era? What are the kind of questions that are being asked by the investment community and business out there when it comes to political stability beyond Museveni's era?
Most of the businesses are interested in economic aspects rather than the political aspects.
Which is an interesting change, because when it comes to Africa, the conversations when it comes to investing on the continent have primarily focused on political standing in whichever territories they're operating in.
Yes, that's true. But you asked some of the questions that come to us, and I guess because of the line of our work, we get the economic questions, especially around issues like infrastructure, for instance. They ask about costs of doing business, and they look at reports that have been produced, international reports that show no improvement sometimes, say from 2010 and 2013. If you look at the doing business reports, you will not see improvements, even in Uganda. You will not see costs going down. So they usually address such issues and want us to look into how we can make the economic environment better. And rarely do we discuss the political question.
So let's take that question to the Minister then. Minister, where are we headed in terms of long-term sustainable economic policy?
What I would like to assure you, Alisha, that there is a stable foundation. Once you have a stable foundation, politics sometimes do not play much of a role. Because now, once you have infrastructure in place, even if governments change, the infrastructure will not change. If you're vying for industrialization, once you have industries in place and you've established macroeconomic stability, I mean, if there is a change, I don't think it would affect the economy. And once you have a stable military support, I mean, it would run on, because it's not owned by one person, it's a government institution. So I'd like to assure Alisha that even if there is any political change, stability will prevail and development will persist.
Okay, so the Minister putting forward assurances here. Herman, if the targets are set, those that are outlined by Vision 2040, it means that GDP per capita would rise from $506 to $9,500. It means 80% of the population would have access to electricity. That currently sits at 11%. 80% of the roads would be paved. That currently sits at 4%. 5 regional cities would have been built. Where are your confidence levels sitting, and do you share government's enthusiasm?
I think I've got every reason actually to share in that vision. What does that mean for us at Standard Chartered Bank, or as a key player that has been in this market for 100 years? We do pride ourselves about a few firsts that we've made in this market, bring the first ATM, and now I think you're talking about 250, doing the mobile telephone banking and all sorts of things. What is important for me, or what is important for Standard Chartered Bank, is actually to play a part in that transformation. I think that for me spells out a lot more what the banking industry can do in Uganda. And I think it's pretty important for everybody listening here that the private sector should actually determine the trend. The private sector should be part and parcel of that vision. So what is important here is to plug into what the government is doing, for the government to provide an enabling environment. And then the private sector will come in to fill the output gap. Is it about the energy? Then we'll bring in our capabilities as Standard Chartered Bank or any other player in the market to bring in the financing if there's need to access the international capital markets. If we're talking about the infrastructure that is required for the country to achieve that 2040, then whichever gap that is there that can't be funded by the government or our dear donors, then I think the pledge I have to make here is that the private sector is ready to step in and actually do or fill in the gap that whoever is leaving. So I think the confidence is there, and all we ask the government is to give the right signals to the private sector, and I think the private sector is ready to roll.
So we've got government's assurances being met by commitment from business itself. And earlier this year, we had the president making very bold statements saying that the opportunities remain abundant because the government has avoided the temptation of using its money to invest because government firms tend not to be efficient, and that he's still waiting for investors to take this up. Could we possibly hit a funding conundrum? And then what?
If you look at investment trends coming into the country, there's increased investment, certainly. Some of the projects haven't yet been delivered, but they're in the pipeline. And there is a lot of progress going on now to even attract more investors. So I don't think we're going to hit a funding problem. I don't see that happening. Of course, with the resource coming in, the oil resource, there's a lot of expectation. And with support from, you've heard about the public-private partnerships and attraction of private investment into infrastructure that's coming in. So I do not think there's going to be a problem with it.
I mean, it takes that commitment from the private sector, as you highlighted as well. But Annette highlighted earlier that when it comes to the ranks on the ease of doing business, Uganda hasn't moved very much. In fact, it ranks at this stage, number 123 out of 183 countries assessed when it comes to the ease of doing business. So where are we seeing a faltering of step here?
We need to pay attention to some of these statistics coming through. What I think, more than pointing out where the faults are, I would like to play a part as part of the private sector in terms of identifying where the barriers are. I think Annette talked about the barriers to intercontinental or intracontinental trade, to some of the non-tariff barriers that are there. And that's where we appeal to the government to make sure that there's a regional approach to some of the solutions that we have. In terms of doing business in Uganda, I think the Uganda Investment Authority has done quite a lot, and I think where we're looking at, we shall soon have a one-stop shop in terms of the incoming investors. But I think it is a lot easier to do business or to open up an account in the bank, for instance, or even to start up a business in terms of registry. It is a journey, and I do believe, I'm optimistic that we shall improve as we go on.
Are you as optimistic, Mason? Let's get your perspective, because you operate in a different sector of the economy. As you highlighted earlier, you've been operating in the territory for many years. How do you rate ease of doing business, and what kind of incentives should government start putting on the table to attract more investment its way?
Yeah, in terms of overall performance for the ICT sector, and in particular for MTN, we continue successfully performing in Uganda. And quite happy to share with you that just within the last 12 months, the number of customers who have accessed the internet using the mobile telephone have doubled. within 1 year. So that shows how the growth continue on to access the technology, which has really helped to achieve the 2040. The government support that we are getting, and I'm serious here, this year and the last year, there's a huge focus on the private sector and engagement. That's what we have seen just during the last few years now, and that's really a significant change in the direction of how the private and the public sector are working together to achieve the overall vision. And as an example, being a partner with this program, MTN is committed for a long-term strategy for the country here. As an investor in the infrastructure, taking this current subscriber base or the important customer base to the next level, and as well continue with the rest of the partners within the same sector and the other industries to partner and take our services to the next level.
Yeah.
And
Alisha, I want to supplement on the point of government's commitment. The government is undertaking a business licensing reform program. Now, the study report from that program revealed that there were over 200 business licenses required to be able to, start a business, operate a business. And the Minister of Finance was shocked by those findings. At the last budget reading, she eliminated 27 of them straight away. And they've done a survey. They've done sort of to establish the costs that are associated with those licenses. And they released 562 billion into the economy just by eliminating those licenses. So for me, that shows commitment on the part of government that they're committed to reform, there's commitment to improvements, but there are challenges as well. I mean, we can't say it's a smooth process all the way.
Can I come?
Minister.
Yes, Alisha. Well, first of all, we should remember that whoever writes out figures, sometimes they're subjective. But then at the same time, it is true that that we could be around there, but we should remember that we are a recovering economy. We had a conflict for over 30 years. And we are now developing, in fact, to be at the rate of 5% as compared to Europe, which has 3%, is really a great improvement. And we should look at these challenges as opportunities. For example, like energy. People can come and invest here in energy, infrastructure. The rail is an opportunity. In fact, I would like to call out to all the prospective investors that there are opportunities here. Rail, energy. We have to improve on our standards. That also needs training. And we should remember that the global crisis affected so many European countries, and some of them have collapsed. But we are striving, and we're doing very well.
And a lot of the foreign investment flow that we have seen has come into the gas and oil space specifically. I mean, we've seen Tullow Oil, CNOOC, and Total company as well. What potential are you envisaging there? And how do you see managing those resources moving forward so that we don't fall into the commodity Uganda doesn't fall into the commodity trap that some of the other African countries have, like Nigeria, Angola, the Congo?
Well, cognizant of the Dutch disease, we have formed or we have designed policies and regulations, and it has taken us a while. You remember in Parliament, well, you might not know, but it took us almost 2 years to be able to evolve policies, stringent policies and regulations to be able to manage our nascent oil industry. Now we have a legal framework, so we have embarked on training. In fact, we started training some time back, training manpower, so that we also have the local content, because it's mainly Tullow Oil and all those foreign companies that we're in. We welcome them, but we would like them also to engage. So these are also part of the regulations. So we are sure we are aware of the Dutch disease, and we have managed to safeguard.